All right, Jon McCarty here with Odyssey Test Prep. Alongside me is JP. Today we are going to be talking about blind review. So some of you may have heard of this, some of you may have not heard of this, some of you may do this, some of you may not. So we're going to dive in deep and discuss the pros and cons and when we think it's appropriate and not. So JP, you've done blind review consistently throughout your prep. It was something that you found a ton of value in. So first of all, explain to us, what is blind review?
Yeah, so as the name implies, blind review is when you review, but you don't check what the answers are. So usually after taking a section, or customized problem set, etc., either right afterwards or after waiting some time, coming back to it and going through the answers again and seeing if I were choosing the right answers or choosing the same answers again. So I would have my my timed condition, my first go at it, and then I would have my second go at it.
So just a clarification there. Is it important that your first attempt is a timed attempt? Like, is this something where you're doing like a timed section or a timed test or a timed problem set, and then you're coming back later to it? Or is it you're just doing any set of problems, even untimed, and then you're coming back later?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think I've always done first go timed, second go untimed. Obviously not spending a crazy amount of time on the second go, on the blind review, but I think the purpose there is, you simulate test taking conditions, 35-minute section for the first go, and for a second go, it's like, okay, if I, have like a little bit more time to think about this, would I choose the same answer? And for the ones where I double down and I get those wrong, it's like, okay, this is like the sirens are going off. Like, I really didn't understand this one. But then there are some where I spend a little bit more time on it and it's like, oh, I actually did get the right answer. Or like, how do I, what lapses were there in my first go? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're starting with a timed section or test. That's the context that I've seen it the most in, as opposed to problem sets. A lot of times problem sets are usually untimed. I guess there are instances where you could do them timed as well, but like when you're getting down to section work and you're getting to the timing aspect of things. So this gives you a good distinction between, I guess, how accurate you are under timed conditions versus how accurate you are under untimed conditions. And they should be different, or they generally will be different in some sense. You should be more accurate untimed, right?
Yeah.
And so the questions that you miss under timed conditions, but you get right under untimed conditions, the gap to you getting those right on the time test is pretty small, or it's at least smaller than the ones where you miss timed and then you miss untimed as well. It means that you're really far off, like you had said, from understanding this. You ever get into the situation where you got one correct, timed, but then you missed it in the untimed section? Maybe you overthought it or something like that. Did you see that being an issue at all, or?
100%. So that's what I think it's. That's where I particularly found value in blind review and with my study buddies, is because there are so many different instances that can really show us like, oh, we don't understand this as well as we should. So there are instances where I got it right on the first go, but I look at it and I changed to the wrong answer. It's like, oh, I definitely didn't. Something's wrong there, right? I didn't understand it well enough the first time, and I convinced myself to a wrong answer. So that would be, again, the sirens going off.
Okay, so in that instance, the gap is probably still smaller than miss, right? If you got it correct, incorrect, correct,
Mm-hmm.
or incorrect, and obviously correct, it seems like you probably have those ones pretty well dialed in. Are you making any notes during your timed test to give you clues as to like, all right, well, this one took me more time than I thought it should. This one I was down to 2. Are you making some notes so when you come back and compare the blind review to your actual exam that you can kind of like hone in on specific questions that you felt maybe a little uncertain about during the exam?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. So I think for that, it depends on the, like, how one is taking the section or the test, etc. So if it's, maybe using certain platforms, you can like write notes. Maybe if you're using like paperback, um, you can scribble some notes. I think I would normally blind review either same day or next day. So I would have like mental notes of everything where, if, I did do a lot of paperback studying when I was doing that, I'd be like, okay, I put a star next to this one, or I make mental notes, like remembering the challenges. But when I
Okay.
was using an online platform, if there was a section to write notes or something like that, I would just jot down something very quick, like
Okay.
C seems like a competing answer. Like, why can't I get rid of it? Something like that.
Okay. So like super brief as fast as, because you're under time conditions, right? So you're really
Yeah.
trying to simulate as close as you can the testing condition, but knowing that this is going to be one that you blind review later. So you had mentioned you're doing it mostly same day or next day. How long of a gap is too long between when you take the time session versus the blind review?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. So I would say that it would, a good marker for that would be if I've had some students where they come back to do BR, to do blind review, and they're like, I forgot my reasoning for this question. I was like, oh, I think maybe we took a little too much time in between, because um, it is very useful when we remember what the original reasoning was and seeing
Yep.
if we get to the same point, or seeing, how does the path look for the second, and how is our understanding of this question. So I think if we're forgetting either our reasoning, or if we're forgetting how approaching that question was, like, exactly what we just talked about. Was that between C here? Why did I flag this one?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've usually got maybe like a day or two, but usually, same day to 2 days, really just wanting to make sure it's still fresh. So we do have that comparison.
Okay. What about, is there any time limit that's too short? Like, would you go straight from time to right into blind review, or do you think you need a bit of a break there?
I think it would depend on stamina. I have some students where it's like, let's like build our stamina, let's like stretch a little bit, like, all right, like let's come back, we're fresh. The cell, the battery is a little bit charged, like let's go. I think for me, I started to do blind review like in the middle of my studying, I think. So by then I think my stamina was okay. So let's say I would take, one section, 135-minute section. And then usually everything's pretty fresh in my head, right? Where it's like, if I just had one more minute, I think I could have solved 16. So
Yeah.
I did have instances where right after I'd go, and usually for that it's cleanup, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, I got this wrong here, but now I see I got this one. But then, stamina's still good. It could still be productive. It's the ones where it's right to wrong, or um wrong. Yeah, I'm trying to look for the ones that are like key flags that my understanding has some gaps. So I've gone straight after. I think that's okay as well.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that certainly with a singular section, right? Endurance shouldn't be too much of an issue. What about like a whole exam and then straight into blind reviewing the whole exam? Do you find people lose steam by the time they get to the end of that, or that because it's kind of like pressure's off, you're just kind of relaxed and going? That's okay too.
I think I would say that depends on the stage that one is at. So when I was in the latter stage of my studying, and say, I was going to hop on a call with a study buddy, we had taken a test. There's not too many that were iffy on, but just very quickly going. Um, I think at the latter stages, it's a little bit mechanical, where it's like, okay, I'm getting through these like 10 questions, like same old, but then it's just like a handful of questions. So, um, I think in the latter stages, like if you go right after, or maybe just look at the ones that you think are like the tricky ones, right? I think that's okay, but generally I would say maybe taking a break so you can um, be refreshed when you look at it, I think is good advice.
Okay, yeah, that that definitely makes sense. I know a lot of the tests when I at practice tests I had taken, I felt a little bit drained afterwards, but then still like very curious as to like what the results were, what I missed, and
Yes.
things like that. So taking a bit of a break makes sense. Now you said you started about halfway through your prep. Was that intentional as to the starting point of when you started to blind review, or do you think it would have been beneficial to use that previously, prior
Yeah,
to that actual start date, and like from the very beginning, like your first diagnostic, you blind review, for instance?
I think that's a great question. I think for me, I just didn't know what blind review was, and it's a technique that I've heard a lot about, and I was like, okay, let me try it, and I found value in it. I think prior, um, I would just check right away, and then I think sometimes, well, I think two things. I think one, um, in the beginning of my studies, um, so much was there is so much to be learned, right? In
Yeah.
how to think and how to play this game, right? And switching into that mindset that is um, helpful, that is suitable for taking this test. Um, so one, I think there's just so much I didn't know, and then two, I just didn't know what blind review was, and I think there were instances where I think maybe in the beginning of our studies we can fall prey to this where um, we get an answer right, but we don't fully comprehend the whole picture, right? So
Yeah.
that should we see it again, we're not at like 80, 90, like we're not at a very high like confidence interval. It's like for this one, I I just happen to fall into the right bucket this time. Or
Yeah.
I understand it, but not for the right reason. There's things like that that sometimes can
Yeah.
go under the radar.
Yeah.
Um, so I think for me, it was, I just didn't know about it. I tried it. I was like, oh, I actually kind of like this.
Okay, cool. So let me make sure I've got this pinned down, right? You take something timed, a section or a test, maybe you take a little break, and then you come back and you retake it untimed. Do you
Mhm.
take every single question that you did untimed? And a few points, like you don't know what you answered the first time, you don't know whether you got it correct or incorrect the first time, so you're not scoring these in between. So yeah, are those 2 points correct? And then also that you're taking every single question over again, or only the questions that you felt a little uncertain about?
Um, I would say so on the first point. I think with that first go, after either taking it, doing BR right afterwards, a couple hours after, same day, next day, um, I would say, yeah, we still remember, or I still remember what the first go was. So it's um, let's say I was doing like paperback, I would have like one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I would right next to a number. I would have what I did on my first go, and then on my second go, small to the right of it, I would just have like a second answer. Some platforms they let you um, like differentiate between first go and second go.
Hmm.
Um, so definitely not a mystery as to what the first go was. If anything, we want the first go to be fresh, right? So we can see like oh, I actually missed this on the first go. Or like I'm still a little confused about this. And on the second point, I think I would say going over. I think again, it depends on the stage. I
Yeah.
know when I was in the latter stages of my studying, when studying with study buddy in Korea, study buddy in Michigan. When I got over the last plateau, we still went over everything, but it was like very mechanical. It was like like we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. But we know what the problem
Mhm.
ones were, what the problem ones were. And we'd be like,
Yeah.
do you mind if we talk about this real quick? And that's where we, spent a lot of time discussing and seeing the nuances and the various um, takeaways from a certain question. But I did have some study buddies. We're short on time. Like let's talk about these, and then we talk about those, and those are the ones that we got wrong, or um, like I think in the latter stages, it's you have like good predictive accuracy. Um, yeah, but I would say as you get more comfortable, it's pretty fast. I think it becomes. I know one drawback. Some people say, "Oh, like all over again." It takes so much time. But I think because the first go is still fresh, sometimes it's just you remember what the first go was, and it's like very quickly, yeah, like yeah, this is A. Um,
Yeah.
they compare those two things, but you can't make an absolute claim out. It'll be like very quick. But for some other ones, it's like let me like really like it's almost like all over again. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, and that's always been, I guess, one objection I've had to it is just the efficiency of it.
yeah,
Um, is it? I have no doubt that it is beneficial, right? But is it the most beneficial thing you could be doing for the time you're spending? Is always a question I've had. So, like full disclosure, when I studied, nobody did blind review. That wasn't really a thing. And so I had never done that. Now, obviously, I would go back and do deep review on the questions I'd missed, and I would have a system where I would mark questions that I was unsure about. Even if I got those right, I would be going back and I would be reviewing those. So to me, that felt more tactical and just like more efficient than and like I said, I've never done the blind review process myself. I do have students who have done it and who have had great success with it, but I've always wondered if the lack of efficiency is worth um, the benefits that you get.
yeah. I so one comment and one question I have is one comment is I think it's such an important point to emphasize what you just said to listeners that we mark questions that even if we get it right, after a fact, just marking it. It's like, let me look into this a little bit more. I got it right, but I'm not sure if I understand it
Mm-hmm.
super well. Being honest, I think is important.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I got it right, party time, put it to the side. It's like, let's not fool
Yeah.
ourselves, right? Because there
Sure.
is value to be had in going over answers we got right. That our comprehension isn't fully there. So I think having a system where you can differentiate and categorize your understanding or how the questions were is very important. So that's comment one. Comment two,
Okay.
I would say, is um, how um, how did your review look like when you were studying?
Yeah. So, kind of a similar process. If I was taking a timed section, I would review that very shortly thereafter. I always found like the quicker I reviewed it, the more of my reasoning I remembered, and I could then, take a longer time to pick apart the reasoning and like dive deeper into like the minutia of the answer choice or maybe what the question stem was, and just making sure that I got like all those little points and that I'm catching everything. What's the conclusion again? Oh man, I think I missed that word because I would have maybe pointed out that this was it. But so if it was a test, I would take a break and then I would come back. So I think that all that's pretty similar. I just would look at only questions. So I would score it immediately because I'm super impatient. And I'm
Yeah.
still a little unclear on the blind review. Would you score it immediately so you knew what your score was before blind review, or do you wait till all is said and done to then score both your first take and
Um,
second?
I would wait until all is said and done, and then I would review. Whoosh. So I have my first take, second take. So it would be like test taking conditions, 35-minute or whatever one's time is, score, and then the blind review score.
Right. Okay.
So then I ideally everything should be a lot better for BR, but it's those lapses where it's like, ooh, like, let's look into this.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it felt pretty intuitive to know the questions I was pretty close to.
Mhm.
And the ones that because for me, like being honest with myself was like very easy to do because there's no gold stars for practice tests, right? So I
Yeah.
don't get to hang that practice test on the fridge and be like, hey, I got it on a practice test, right? Like that's not where it counts, right? Um, and when I took the test too, law schools didn't just take your highest score; they averaged your scores. So if
Mhm.
like your first take, the pressure was so high to
Yeah.
not bomb it the first time that like it also helped in my prep where I was like, all right, there's I can't sit around here and bullshit about like, oh yeah, I got it right, so I got it right. It was like, well, no, I'm not sure I could get that right on test day.
Mhm.
It bent in my favor this time, but I don't feel comfortable staking my law school future
Mhm.
on whether I'm going to be able to reproduce that or not.
Yeah.
Um, now you can have a few takes, the pressure's off, they're going to take your highest score. So that is, I think, a good change to the LSAT. But um, so having to be honest with myself and really looking at any question that I felt slightly uncomfortable with and getting in there and doing it. So the idea of going back and looking at the questions where I was like, oh, here's the conclusion, here's the premise, oh, that's correlation, this is causation, this is exactly how it's worded. I've looked at all the other answer choices and eliminated them for very specific reasons, and I'm off to the next one. To me, uh, seemed like after the fact because it wasn't something I ever thought about while I was studying.
Mhm.
After the fact seems to me currently as a potential waste of valuable study time.
Mhm. I think one thing I would say is, and I guess it depends on where one is in their studying, but usually BR wouldn't take that much time. Maybe it's because I did it in like the middle or like after I had a foundation. It would be very fast. It would be
Give me
like
like an estimate because I've never, like I said, I've never done. So you're 35 minutes for your time section. How long is your BR process for just a 35-minute section?
sometimes it would be live, like on the spot. I'd be on a call with a study buddy from Korea. We just took a section and we go and it'd be like A B B C D like do, and then sometimes we'd clash like, oh, let's talk about it, or hey, like I did get deep for this one, but what are your thoughts on this? So it would be sometimes just like right on the spot where we remember our reasoning, and it wouldn't be like a whole redo, right? Sometimes it'd be just kind of flying by it. So it would be very, um, very quick. And then I guess the value in that would be in having that like little bit of extra review right before we check, to see if there's any surprises or any things we can catch.
Mm-hmm.
So it would generally be like quite fast. I think
Give me an average
maybe
number of minutes just so I can pin it down in my
um,
mind. Like, is it more than 35 minutes or less than 30? I mean, in my head, because like I said, I've never done it. So
mhm.
I think a lot of people who haven't done it and they're like, they may feel the same way as me and when they first hear it. Like, I think, all right, you did it timed. That took you 35 minutes to do it untimed. Like, is that going to take you like 70 minutes or like 90 minutes?
Oh,
You
okay.
see where I'm at?
Yeah, yeah.
But the way you're
Definitely.
describing it sounds a little different. So I'd
Yeah,
love to hear how it actually like worked for you.
yeah. That's a great question. I would uh be curious to see if other people like take it all over again. I think because it's done shortly afterwards, and we still remember, the battle that we had previously fought. Um, it's quicker than 35 minutes. Usually it's you go through it like 1 through 10. I'm like very clear on the reasoning. I would double down very easily. Like I just remember, or going through it like, okay, this is C, this is D, 100%, no
Okay.
doubt.
Yeah.
But then it would be, spending like 2, 3, 4, 5 extra minutes, like, oh, this pesky number 12, like how, like, how do I differentiate between A and C there? Or, what's like the essence of this answer choice? And they're using that word. So it would be very fast, very fast. Let me stay with this one for a little bit. I'm not spending, a crazy amount of time, but it's like, I'm looking at it, second fight, how does it compare to my first reasoning? All right, this is what I'm going to do for my blind review answer. Like, fast, fast, fast. Like, okay, this one. So definitely not like, I would say like less than 35 minutes, because I think prior to doing blind review, I was, not trying to trick myself, right? And I did have like a flagging system, and I did, make like mental notes of how the bouts were with the questions.
Okay. So I guess the additional time. So from like a test that you would have done prior to when you started blind review, the amount of time or a section, we'll just keep it on sections. So like you took the section, kind of had everything flagged out. You went back and you went a deep, presumably deep dove on all of the questions that you missed, maybe
Mhm.
one or two that you got right, but were maybes, versus taking the section, doing the blind review, and then going back and doing the deeper dive. How much extra time do you think the blind review takes in
Yeah.
your experience?
I think that's a good question. And I have a little comment after I answer that. I think I would say, I think I would say not much more time, or maybe, it's a little bit more time. Definitely not like you're doing this section all over again. Because I would say, like, before, I would take it, and then check the answers immediately. I am impatient. I want to know, how
That
was
was
my
me.
battle,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And then just be like a quick run through, like, oh, okay, 1 through 10, 1 through 7. Okay, I got you guys. Um,
Yeah.
and then, I get some wrong, like, let me like sit on it. Let me, like, why is it C? Like, huh? Like, I spent some time with it. Um, but I don't, again, it might be because I did BR like in the latter part of my studies, like
Uh-huh.
the middle. I had a foundation. It would be kind of like first go like A, B, C, D, like B, blah blah blah, blah. And then on blind review, it's like I fully remember the mechanism. It's like a quick skim, like, oh, like, or sometimes not even a skim. It'd be like, oh, I 100% know this is E, or like I'm doubling
Yeah.
down, like, very very fast. And um, so I would say almost same, or just like some minutes more, less, definitely less than like 30. It's not like you're redoing the whole section again, where
Okay.
it's like, I have to first go 35 minutes again. Let me spend 1, 2. No, definitely not. Much, much shorter than that. And then my comment was, I think and having you ask that question, I remember, um, like, the particular value. I'm not sure if I, uh, mentioned it before, or if I, got the point across, but the value was, I think before, right? I would take the section. I'm so curious, like, oh, okay, -4, like, what went wrong, right? What can I do? And
Yeah.
I would, have all the answers right in front of me. So then when I was grappling with, say, like number 12 and number like 16, I'd be trying to shape my reasoning to the right answer. And then in those
Huh.
instances, sometimes I
Yes.
would convince myself that I understood it when I didn't. I would be like,
Yeah.
of course it has to be C, like,
Right. Yeah. So obvious now.
so like C is staring at me in the face. It would be, I think,
Yeah.
Someone once mentioned the concept of like, and I'm not borrowing the words correctly, but um, I don't think the person said this word, but essentially what the person was saying is um, like dead PTs, not dead, but like questions that are already used, and differentiating the value between used questions and new questions. And the person was saying something along the lines of, you don't want to like burn through PTs where it's like, I'm not building the foundation, but I'm like, test every day, baby. Like, okay. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, these are valuable resources to test your
Yeah.
understanding. And let's not burn through them before having done some review or building or making sure that the me that took this one is
It's
different
still
from
the
the me
me that
that
takes the next one. Yeah.
exactly. So that concept of like
Yes.
new versus used question, I think, um, is valuable because um, when an answer was staring at me in the face, I'd be like, oh, how could anyone think otherwise? Like, see, you are such a great answer choice. But,
Hmm.
um, you know, versus blind review where like 1 through 10, I'm good. I look at 12,
You
I
have to
look at
struggle with
15,
it again.
I
Yeah.
struggle with it again. And it's like, actually, I'm going to change to, I think it's um, having a little bit more time to review and not knowing what the answer is, I think
Yes.
led to like a deeper understanding of
Yeah.
the question. Sometimes when you know it, it's even if you understand the reasoning, sometimes it's like, oh, like why do I need to dig in deeper? Like, yeah, it's that. But
Yeah.
then when I didn't know, I would really try to create the whole world, right? And I think I'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, what if I change this word? And I think that's where I found so much value. Talking to a study buddy, and we're really grappling. Like, what do you think if we change this word, or oh, perhaps this answer choice is actually answering something else, or maybe if they mentioned this point, but what if we like within this world, is this still acceptable? Um,
Yeah.
so I think that blind fight is quite useful, and
Interesting.
it's those
Yeah.
where it's most useful.
Yeah, I see a ton of value there as well because that is one of the things that I do see most often. And we've all been guilty of it where you see the right answer and you're like, I just don't feel like it. I'm just gonna I get it. I sort of get it. I think I get
Yeah.
it. And I just want to move on. But I see blind review kind of like preventing you from taking that shortcut and forcing you to get back in there and like engage with it again on a really um you know, kind of detailed way that because you can't just go and reverse engineer the answer choice into something that sounds pretty good logically to you, but may have missed the actual point altogether. And with students, I see them trying to do that all the time and just throwing just like junk logic into it. And like I said,
Yeah.
I'm not about it. I've done it too. Just like throwing junk logic in there to be able to just move on. So that's cool. There's another thing that like that you were saying that also stands out to me as having like a reasonable amount of value is going through and just like the fast way you're going through the correct questions that you got. Like a lot of times in my mind, I was thinking, man, that feels like wasted time. But just like another touch point of re-emphasizing that logic and just like solidifying that in deeper and deeper and deeper into your knowledge base and in your subconscious so that when you see it again it just becomes like even more automatic so like you can like you did it at your regular pace but now you're doing it at like lightning pace and you're seeing it
Yeah.
all happen like really fast and that's helping you probably increase your speed and your processing power for when you see similar things in the future. So I think I'm starting to get it a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and I also like that it doesn't take. I really thought it would take like 70 minutes to do it. Actually, so if anybody else is out there thinking that like I don't have the time to go through this whole section again, I think the way you're describing it sounds very valuable for the time that you're getting. Not to mention the data that you get afterwards of here are the questions that I got right timed. Here's what I missed on blind review. Here's the gap between them. Am I narrowing that gap, which means that your timing, your speed are getting better, and that you're actually performing closer to your highest
yeah.
potential of knowledge on the timed exams. So you want to be like really narrowing that gap as you study, I would imagine that your blind review and your actual start to like converge on each other. Probably not to the same point, but like instead of 15-point difference, maybe it comes down to a
Yes,
2 or 3 point difference.
exactly. And these are, excellent markers. Like, okay, the ride's a little bit more pleasant now. Um,
Yeah.
I um, I never considered the time thing. I think for me it was just so natural where it was like, I think maybe it's because again, I did in the middle of my studies. I did do a lot of like junk food studying, right? Where it's like, okay, I need to make sure like I'm doing some organic study. I have the Greek yogurt, the fruits, like no more fast food studying. Um, so I think for me there was an emphasis on timing and speed and like with the time that I have, how am I squeezing it? But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely if someone is, like, 1 through 10, very simple. I'm gonna sit down with it again and do another 35 minutes section. I have to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, um, I think, you're, and if you have to do that for multiple sections, the test is like even double, or maybe if someone has extra
Yes.
time. Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely not the, that maybe that's like junk food studying, right? But I do think, um, the speed running of it, where sometimes it would be, just like, oh, like, 1 through 5, 1 through 7, like I very thoroughly understood this one. And it's just like like just writing down the same answers again, versus
Were
some.
you thinking were you thinking consciously during that process, like by me doing just like ripping through these, that this is going to increase my speed on similar questions and on test day? Or was that just like for efficiency's sake that you were doing that and perhaps you got that result? Because when you explained it to me, like I would just tear through 1 through 10, and I already got these right, and I'm just doubling down on all of these. To me, I was like, oh man, like that sounds really interesting because you're just like pushing yourself to a pace that is unattainable on a fresh question, but
Yeah,
you're like really pushing that pace and that speed through things that you've already just done, and then that's creating like this new pace benchmark within like your mental processing capacity.
yeah. I think I would say, um, whether or not it was conscious. Um, I think because I would always do when it was fresh, I still remember the reasoning. I still remember the nuances. Um, Oftentimes it would be like realizing like, oh, the confidence interval is very high for this one. I still remember the approach. I still remember how I got rid of like 3 to 4. Um, it's like there are ones that are already in my toolbox. Um,
Yep.
so I wouldn't like sit there again and spend like another like couple minutes on it. Um,
Yeah, there's really nothing to do at that point.
it, it's already in the toolbox. And for those
Yeah.
ones where, say, I did a speed run, but I get it wrong, where it's like, for real go B, blind review B, but it's like D. Then it's like,
Mm.
oh, this like, um, the surprise is maybe it's because it's long after the fact, but during the times they'd be like, oh God, like like I got it wrong. Like I was my confidence interval so high. Like, oh,
Yeah.
what's wrong? But
Those are scary
those,
ones where you're like, I was really confident twice and I
yes,
still got it wrong. Yeah.
yes. And maybe I could say this after the fact, but those are quite wonderful because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, this,
Absolutely.
the siren is like, wee, 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 but
Yeah.
I can add this to my toolbox, right? Like this is a high value area to work on to
Yeah.
to make it so that next time I take it, I'm a little bit different. This is a high value area to work on because I really don't, something went wrong here. If I double
I
down
love
and got it.
Yeah, I love that framing. Instead of like I'm a failure here and like
Yeah,
internalizing that like I failed twice here. I don't get the like it's a high value area to work on. Like that's
yeah,
such a better way to view it, that like in a very positive sense. Because again, like these practice tests aren't going on your permanent record. They're not going on the fridge. Nobody cares if you scored a 180 on a practice test.
Yeah.
Nobody. Right. But yeah. But so instead of like feeling negative about the things that you've missed, even if you missed it twice and your confidence interval was higher, like there's like if you want to view it negatively, there's like no worse way to get a question wrong is to get it wrong super confidently, right? But it's like a super high value area to look at and to work on, and if you can get to that kind of perspective, then man, you're going to see gains super fast.
Yeah. I really like how you mentioned that soft factor, John, because I think it's something we previously talked about, but definitely very underrated. I think um, in trying to cultivate that perspective with students, I think the students that are able to more quickly borrow that perspective, to utilize that perspective, are the ones where the studying is a little bit of a smoother journey, because obviously it's not like from A to B, but it's a little bit wavy, ups and downs, figuring things out. But I think when there are those downs, like how do we respond? I think that's so important, because sometimes for the students where it's like, I'm a failure, I can't do it, it's like, Evan, like, the house is on fire. Trying to review and do more study when, the house is on fire is, it's like you're already fuming, and
Yeah.
it's harder to be productive, or it's harder to feel good. So then, you just burn out. And so I think that perspective of one, when we obviously taking the real test, scary, but, with practice, we can make it feel like another practice test. And with these practice tests, we understand that, it's not a linear path, but it's a moving average, and we want to just move that moving average in a better direction. I think that kind of takes some of the pressure off. So it's quite helpful.
Yeah. And for some reason, tests and the LSAT and things, people feel like they should be able to walk in. I mean, I've heard countless stories of people like, yeah, I figured I'm pretty smart, go in and give it a shot. That's like going into the batter's box in Major League Baseball and thinking you're going to get a hit. Like you are going to strike out. There is no doubt. Like and you are competing against like intellectual, like Hall of Famers on the LSAT. Like these guys and these intellectual Hall of Famers have been prepping for this exam for like 6 months to come in and compete and do this thing. And if you think you're just going to walk off the street and get a hit, like you might get lucky, but like I would much rather get into the batting cages and strike out a bunch of times there, and then start to get your rhythm and start to get a few hits, and then start to maybe hit some home runs at some point. But you have to see those those areas where you're not performing well as opportunities, because that's where all your improvement lies.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned a batting cage. I actually just did it. I'm not sure if you tried those batting cages, but I did one for the first time recently. And, there's the different lanes, right? It's like, this is like this fast, like very fast. And there's some where they switch it, and it's like, oh, it's a slide, or it's this. Just like back off that analogy, if we trip and fall, or if we strike out, it's actually great that it's during the practice round, right? I want to be surprised now, so that when I take the real test, I've seen this thing. Oh, I know what a slider is. Oh, like that's a fast one, Um, less surprises there, surprises now. If there's a surprise now, like,
For sure.
okay, let's work through it. I'm glad
Game
I was
day,
surprised.
Game day is the only thing that matters. So like get all the kinks out before then, and then go in and perform. So yeah, back to just like the blind review. So, and I think we've talked about this before, but once you switched up to that about halfway through your studying, and you found that you were kind of like at a plateau, and then that helped you break you out and start moving again until you reached the next plateau. Am I remembering that correctly?
I did think it was one of the components that helped me uh, increase the nuance to my study, to my review. And I would say it was one of the things that helped me move to the next level.
Yeah. Well, you've convinced me. I think that at least my perspective on it is it has changed a ton, and I hope a lot of other people's perspectives. If you had, if you've been thinking about blind review or you've heard of blind review and you haven't tried it yet, um, add it into your review process and see if you start to get results, if you're connecting with the material better. Like I said, I didn't not try it because I didn't think it had value. It just wasn't something that was really going on with the test when I had studied, or I had just never heard of it. Perhaps other people were doing it. And in my head it was like one thing, but in reality I think you've described it in a way that makes a lot more sense. And I'm always more in favor of uh, actual results versus
Yes.
like theoretical ideas of what the results might be had someone possibly used it. So tangibly, it sounds like it's made a big difference. And I know for a lot of students I've worked with, they've sworn by it and had great results.
And also being mindful, I would say, just to recap, of the concept that we keep bringing up, and or maybe I particularly like this analogy, but the junk food studying, and the good whole foods organic studying. So and in doing VR, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna time to take it all. Being aware of um, valuable um, study time. Mhm. So I think the points that you brought up were very good. And should someone use this process, how can we use this process in a way that is very effective?
Yeah, and efficiency, I think, is important, right? You only have, even if you have cleared your schedule for the LSAT, you only have so many hours in the day which your brain is going to work at the highest level that it needs to conquer this
Exactly.
exam. So you have to be very judicious with how you spend that time. So making sure that you are focusing that time on the areas that are going to be the highest yield, that are um, really review oriented, I think is super important, especially towards the latter half. Like you said at the beginning, there's a ton of just like you're just absorbing as much information as
Yeah.
you possibly can
Yeah.
and then trying to put it into practice. So it's a pretty complex process, but effective studying and efficient studying are super important. And I've always been an advocate of taking a day off every week. People are like, I'm going to study 100 hours a week, and I'm going to study every single day. Again, you start to lose efficiency at some point. And so keeping those kinds of things in mind. And I think blind review, if you think it's going to be inefficient, I think JP's shown that it actually can be a very efficient process and something that helps you on so many different levels of, speeding up on the questions that are within your toolbox already, finding questions where maybe there's a discrepancy between timed and untimed performance, and then trying to narrow that gap. And then also getting the data afterwards of how am I doing on my time sections versus untimed? How far apart are they? And how can
Yeah.
I start to bring those two things together? Because that's what's important. You have to get it done on test day and the timed conditions. So being able to narrow that gap and giving yourself like really directed areas to be able to narrow that gap, I think is super important as well.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a point that I emphasize, but that's something that you said. I think um, that's such a key marker, where it's, it starts here. How do we get it closer and closer and closer? Yeah. So it's almost
Yeah,
like,
I
oh,
think it just
there's,
forces you. Yeah, it forces you to focus on it, right? If you have this huge gap, you can't help but stare at that gap and be like, I need to shrink this
yes.
gap,
Oh,
right? Yeah. But if you don't even know the gap is there or what the gap is, then your focus is off of it. And so much of what you put your mind on, your subconscious is just going to do everything it can to take care of the things that you focus on. So if you focus on, improving things and finding high yield areas, or if you focus on this gap between timed and untimed, your brain is just going to start to work those problems out on its own. And it may not even be on a conscious level, but there's no human who can sit there and have a 15-point gap between their timed and their blind review and not want to do something about it. Right.
Yeah. It's, and I think it's, whether it's BR or other things we talked about, a big theme in what we talk about is having, again, just with the analogies, an experiment and these variables that we can track and modulate, right? So I think, this is one that I found to be useful.
Yep. And with experiments, you need good data. And I think blind review gets you some of the best data that you can possibly get through that review process. So, all right. Well, I think this is a great place to end it. Thank you, JP. I really appreciate, opening up my eyes on blind review. I hope a lot of people out there got a ton of value about what blind review is, how to use it, how to be efficient with it, maybe even the time frame in which to use it. At what point in your study process does it make the most sense? And if you're at the beginning and it feels super heavy and hard to do, and you drop it, maybe come back to it halfway through, or once, 3/4 of the way, once you're really heavy into timing and practice tests. So yeah, I really appreciate it, JP. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think you asked excellent questions, and I hope, like you said, viewers, if you try it, see how it goes, maybe add it later. But I hope you guys found some value. So appreciate it.
All right, fantastic. Well, we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much.
Yep.